Welcome to the Mama Needs a Moment podcast. We're your hosts, Chrissy and Cindy, co-founders of HER Health Collective, and moms who totally get the chaos of juggling it all.
But here's the thing, your well-being matters. That's why we're on a mission to change the way moms take care of themselves.
We bring you quick 10 to 15 minute bite-sized episodes packed with expert advice on women's health, parenting, and self-care, plus real-life tips you can use right now.
So take a deep breath, grab your lukewarm cup of coffee, and let's make these moments count.
We are so excited to welcome several of our HER expert providers to today's conversation. You can learn more about each of the experts featured in this episode, as well as many other trusted professionals through our free provider directory linked in the show notes. This episode is part of our Expert Roundtable series, where we gather professionals from a range of fields to talk about the topics that matter to moms the most. We host 4 of these discussions each year, and this is the 4th and final roundtable in our 2025 series. We will begin our 2026 roundtable series early in the new year. Our roundtables are a cornerstone of HER Plus Health Collective. They bring together diverse perspectives, foster collaboration across disciplines, and help us support moms with more connected, well-rounded care, while also giving our experts a chance to learn from one another. Today, we are diving into the theme, holistic solutions for common mom ailments, from fatigue and burnout to digestive issues and hormonal changes. So many of the challenges moms face are deeply interconnected. Our experts are here to help us look beyond quick fixes and explore how nutrition, movement, mental health, and medical care can work together to support whole body wellness. Before we begin, we'll invite each of our experts to briefly introduce themselves and share their area of focus. We're going to go ahead and get started in no particular order. Carrie, if you'll go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Carrie Lett. Sorry, my voice is going to go in and out. I've been losing it all day. I hope it stays with us. But I am a registered dietitian. I specialize in pediatric and maternal nutrition, and I'm also a certified lactation counselor as well.
Thank you so much for being here, Carrie. Next, we have Dr. Lindsay Muma.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I am a chiropractor, and I am also a certified DNS practitioner, and my focus is truly on supporting core health throughout the life. So that ends up being a lot of new moms and pregnant women, as well as babies, because that's the time period in our lives when our cores go through the most amount of change. I'm also an author, and I've written the book, Your Pelvic Floor Sucks, which is a little tongue-in-cheek, but is intended to help people realize that dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction is not a normal thing, and that we can do more than just suck the pelvic floor up and in for improving health there.
Wonderful. Thank you. We're so happy to have you here. Next, we have Kate.
I'm Kate Lehman. I am a certified nurse midwife, mom to 2 tween daughters, and I've been in the area since 2009. I have worked in a variety of settings, including home, birth center, and hospitals. Recently, I founded a practice, Mother Love Wellness, dedicated to closing the gap in postpartum and perimenopausal care. I'm passionate about helping women understand their bodies, their hormones, because I know an educated woman is going to make better choices. And I am offering virtual care and just recently started renting space at an amazing lactation clinic, if you haven't heard of it, Teaching Babies to Nurse on Highway 54 in Durham. So I'm excited to be here and to meet all of you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here, Kate. Next up, we have Dr. DeVries.
Hi there, Abby DeVries. I'm a family physician and a certified menopause practitioner, mom of 3 teenagers, and I opened recently a direct primary care practice in Durham over in Sutton Station, focused on women in midlife, ages 40 to 60. So I'm doing membership-based primary care as well as individual menopause-focused or perimenopause-focused visits for folks who have a primary they like but just want to get a little bit of extra help on the menopause transition. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And last but certainly not least, Nikki, can you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Yes. Hi, I'm Nikki Fowler. I am a family nurse practitioner at Essential Health in Raleigh. We are a direct primary care, functional medicine based clinic. We see all ages, but definitely have a special heart and passion for women's health. So excited to be with you guys and on this panel.
It's such a pleasure to welcome you all here today. And we've got a wonderful discussion planned. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I have worked with moms for, almost 15 years. I am a mom of 2 teenagers as well. And if there is one thing that all moms seem to agree on, it is that exhaustion is just a constant companion throughout motherhood. Between the poor sleep and the nutrient depletion, and there's endless responsibilities, it's no wonder that so many of us feel drained. But what if that fatigue is actually our bodies asking for something deeper? Carrie, this question I'm going to direct to you, and then any of the other experts, please jump in if you have anything you'd like to add. From a nutrition standpoint, what are the most common reasons moms feel so depleted, and how can they start to gently support their energy again?
I always encourage moms to pause and ask why they're feeling the way that they do. I feel like exhaustion shouldn't be accepted as just a normal part of motherhood. Sure, there's busy seasons where we're just getting through, like you said, and we're just surviving, and that's understandable. But I feel like if the fatigue continues to linger, then it's definitely worth looking into closer. From a nutrition perspective, I would say some of the most common reasons that I see women feeling so depleted are we're having some nutritional deficiencies. Maybe we have some blood sugar imbalances, some digestive issues. And then, of course, the stress overload and the sleep deprivation, like you mentioned, definitely play a role as well. And then if we're thinking pregnancy and breastfeeding, especially, are times that our bodies are giving so much that our nutrient stores can really take a hit. And then on top of that, like you shared, we're caring for everyone else. It's easy to forget about ourselves, skipping meals, just kind of grabbing the scraps off your kid's plate, forgetting to drink water. And over time, that really adds up. So I think if we're going to try to kind of slowly build our energy again, I would say check your labs, like reach out to one of your providers and see if they can investigate if there is something deeper going on, thinking of our iron levels, our B12, our vitamin D, our thyroid, what's our blood sugar look like, and then seeing at home if we can build out balanced meals, aiming for some protein, some fiber, some healthy fats at each of the meal, along with plenty of water. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just trying the best that we can. And then building in maybe some small moments of calm to try to calm down if we're feeling extra stressed. Maybe that's a short walk. Maybe that's just a few deep breaths. Maybe that's listening to a podcast. But just helping kind of your body kind of reset a little and get out of survival mode and really start to restore.
Carrie, one of the things that you said that was a great segue into my next question, which is directed to Nikki, of course, anyone, please jump in, is that exhaustion is not the norm. We might think it's the norm because we're all experiencing it, but it can get to a point where it's not normal. And Nikki, I'd like to talk to you for this next question, that so many moms just assume that exhaustion is just part of the deal of being a parent, having all of the responsibilities and whatnot. How can we tell when fatigue is a sign of something deeper? Carrie had mentioned hormonal imbalance or burnout. How can we tell when fatigue is a sign of something deeper, like a hormonal imbalance or burnout? And when do we know to come to a facility to get special attention? This episode is brought to you by HER Circle, the ultimate community for moms looking for real connections, meaningful experiences, and expert support.
From mom's night out and family adventures to book club, volunteer opportunities, and expert workshops, Her Circle is where moms come together to learn, laugh, and lift each other up.
Spots are limited, so join the waitlist at herhealthcollective.com/membership and be the first to know when doors open.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of walking that line there, right? Of what's normal, what's
Definitely.
not. And we know, like I'm just kind of echoing some of what Carrie said, there's going to be days or seasons where we may feel a little bit more stretched thin. This question resonated with me because when I was a first time mom, I went to my primary care provider several months into things. I was back to work and I said, I'd like to take a deeper dive on my labs. I'm feel like I'm kind of have this chronic fatigue issue going on. And she looked at me and she said, "You're a working mom. That's all it is." And I thought, this is not right. And thus began some of my personal shifts with things. But I think, listen to your gut, know yourself. And you do have to look at kind of the patterns that are going on and the chronicity of things, right? You can step back, you can evaluate what's going on. Is this just a season? Are we doing, am I doing too much? Like, am I plugged into work? Are we doing competitive sports? Are we, am I stretching myself thin on a time frame? But either way, I think we oftentimes chalk up symptoms to it's my demands, it's the schedule. But you have to trust yourself. And I think there's always a place, even if it's preventatively, to get with your trusted provider, collaborate. It's great to have some lab work because then you have data that's matching with, like, hey, these are my clinical symptoms. And you can really look at this from a holistic whole body approach. And, these are going to be, like Carrie said, discussing, some of the basics too, like hydration, caffeine, sleep. But when you have some lab data, I think that can be very helpful. And whether this is postpartum, whether this is in the throes of raising teenagers, perimenopause, these are critical times for women for thyroid health, sex hormone health, and as Carrie said too, iron. And these can be some underlying issues that we will see that can be linked to or causative of the fatigue problem. And so I think it's imperative to not discount everything to this is my life right now, the demands and schedule. So I think that's when those symptoms are affecting your day to day, that's the time to dive a little deeper.
It's a great point that you made where as parents, we all say, this is just how it is. I'm just supposed to be tired. So thank you for clarifying that. And I'd like to pull Kate into this chat on the topic of quote unquote, is this normal? The stage that moms are in when they're feeling really run down. What do you suggest moms do at home? Do you have additional feedback and pointers that you'd like to add in to Nikki and Carrie's statements from before?
Yeah, I love this question because it really centers the woman as the expert on her own body. I think we live in this hustle culture in our society that your value is based on your productivity, but really stepping back and being like, no, this is not right. I need to get help for this. In my workshops, I talk a lot about these basic pillars, echoing what some of the other providers were saying around basics like sleep, nutrition, getting movement, and then also the household rebalance after having a kid. You have all your old activities that you were doing that you're now put additional responsibilities on as new parents, and really evaluating those and seeing if there's any low-hanging fruit that you can make adjustments to, trying that for a week. And then, if you're not getting the results that you're hoping for, coming in. Exceptions to that would be if you're really struggling through the day, not able to care for yourself, your kids, things like shortness of breath, headaches, dizziness, pain, all those are cues to come in sooner, right away. But when we do meet up, just trying to figure out what's going on together, it's always a collaboration. And it could be troubleshooting, getting you more support at home, again, drawing labs, looking at other things like hormone balance, getting mental health support, and medication if you need it. But making a personalized plan based on where you're at and what your needs are, and then also deciding what kind of follow-up you think you need. It's a good place to start.
I actually have been surprised by the number of women who so diligently take their prenatal supplements during pregnancy and then completely fall off of their supplement regimen in the postpartum time period. And a lot of them aren't given guidance by their primary birth provider about continuing supplementation. But I think a lot of postnatal depletion, like, is not cured by any means by simply taking a few supplements, but the longevity of missing out on daily supplementation. Our soil is so depleted at this point that you need supplementation pretty much anywhere in the United States where you live in order to ensure that you're getting enough basic nutrients. And so women who are so regular about doing that during their pregnancy tend to fall off of that habit in the postpartum time period. And that's a way of getting the B vitamins back into your system and really kind of like filling in some of the nutritional gaps that might be happening. Paying attention to all the things that everyone else has so eloquently said is truly important. That's one of those things that, like Kate was saying, some of the low-hanging fruit. I consider a daily supplementation routine to be pretty low-hanging fruit, even though there is obviously a cost to that. And there's, the like additional thing that you need to remember every day. But when I tell my patients, like gratefully now there are actually postnatal supplements that are available, but I tell my patients just at baseline, continue to take a prenatal until you're done nursing your very last baby. Because as soon as you're done nursing, you're now preconception for the next kid if you're planning on having any. And so continuing that daily supplementation, I think, is a way that we can fairly easily continue to give ourselves the nutrients that we so desperately need in the postpartum time period.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We are going to shift gears. We're going to dive into the gut, the core, and really just a body being in transition. Because let's face it, as women, our bodies change constantly, from postpartum recovery to the hormonal shifts that we've mentioned quite a few times now, perimenopause. There are just constant influx things that are happening in our bodies. I'd love for us to dive into a discussion and talk about how those changes show up in our gut, our core, our overall sense of balance. This first question is going to be directed to Carrie. In previous conversations, Carrie, you've mentioned digestive upset from hormonal shifts and rushed eating. What are some simple ways moms can support their digestion even when mealtime feels chaotic, which, let's face it, is most of the time as a mom?
I think it's important to remember that digestion isn't just what we're eating, but it's also about how we're eating. And when we're rushing through the meals, our bodies don't have the time to shift into that kind of rest and digest mode, which can lead to bloating and gas and just really feeling uncomfortable after eating. And of course, our hormones also play a huge role as well. We have hormones that are regulating hunger and satiety, but we also have our sex hormones that are influencing digestion as well. I feel like most moms start to feel this during pregnancy when progesterone's kind of slowing down digestion, maybe increasing heartburn, but it also can happen with our monthly cycles as well. So I think if we were trying to support digestion just a little bit more, even when life's a little chaotic, just trying to slow down while eating. Ideally, our meals would last at least 20 minutes if we can. But again, just trying to kind of get into that rest, digest mode, making sure to stay hydrated, have all the high fiber foods, variety of fruits and veggies, the fermented foods, all the things that are going to support our gut health. And then really, again, just making sure that we're getting enough rest, managing our stress as we possibly can, just because our gut and our nervous system are deeply connected. But even small shifts, like, again, sitting down for meals or taking a few deep breaths before we're eating, can really make a huge difference.
I love that. That's so important. I was raised eating quickly. It was just how my mom grew up with 5 brothers, and that was just the thing. And so I'm an only child. It was just me and my mom, but we ate fast, and it still sort of follows me. So in order to sort of really be present and not be on my phone, and I've started using an adult coloring book while I'm having lunch in the middle of the day. And it makes me eat so much slower and just really focus on the bite. And then I'll color my next little square. It's just a really nice way to be present in the moment. And I think that has been really helpful. But you're so right. Finding ways to slow down is really, really crucial. And it's something that we don't have nearly enough of in our day-to-day life. I'm going to direct this to Dr. Muma now. Stress, urinary incontinence, and core weakness are topics moms don't often talk about. I do feel like it's becoming more widely known, but it's still kind of taboo. You certainly don't want to walk into a room and say, I have this. It's something we kind of keep hidden. What is one thing you wish every mom knew about rebuilding core strength after birth?
Thank you so much for this question. It's one of my favorites. This actually ties back to what Carrie was just talking about. I wish that people understood that their core health actually begins with breathing. And it's one of the things that we tend to take for granted because on average, 12 to 16 times every single minute, you'll take a breath. And it's not something that you think about. It's not something that you're present with. It's something that is involuntarily happening within your body. And when you're stressed, you tend to breathe up into your chest and through your mouth and take these short, shallow breaths as if you're being chased by a tiger. But unfortunately, it's chronic stress that is leading to these short, shallow breaths instead of acute stress that we would be running from. And so we have to work kind of against the way that our society has scheduled chronic stress into our daily lives and intentionally begin with breathing for our core to actually be able to function at its most optimum. The health of the core is not just a muscular container. This actually is dependent upon the health of the gut. There's a strength and conditioning coach who's a PT, and he was talking at a seminar that I was at one time, and he said that if you go to Wendy's and you get a cup of chili for lunch, and then you try to max your 1 rep back squat after lunch, your gut is less concerned with whether or not you can squat and more concerned with what might be coming out the other end. And that's just a hilarious way of considering that what happens in your core primarily is actually digestion and food absorption and taking nutrients from the food that we consume and converting that into usable energy. So our core health in terms of stability kind of takes a back burner. So we have to intentionally put that onto the front burner, and it actually starts with breathing. So most people breathe dysfunctionally. I would say 9 out of every 10 patients who comes into my office gets breathing as their first exercise, and we're heavy on exercise here. So in my practice in North Raleigh, Triangle CRC, we really emphasize core health because that's kind of the backbone of what we started doing when I began this practice. And every single one of our patients gets breathing at some point in their treatment plan. The only patients who don't get coached breathing are the infants. And other than that, everyone else is getting breathing as part of their core health trajectory. This helps to stimulate more appropriate digestion. So when Carrie was talking about slow down and take some breaths before eating, that actually mechanically stimulates digestion, but also at a down regulation level can stimulate digestion because it can help bring the nervous system from the fight or flight sort of fight, flight, or freeze, actually, because I am a student of Dr. Porges, and the polyvagal theory is really important here. But the kind of upregulation of the nervous system trying to work its way through stress, we can downregulate the nervous system and begin digestion. And this is also helping our core and pelvic floor function more optimally. So the other thing that I wish everyone knew is that in the immediate postpartum time period, most women end up having the same things that their baby is dealing with. So babies are typically born with actually a diastasis of their rectus abdominis muscles because their core has not yet established enough function to be completely patent. When we're in utero, we are being fed oxygenated blood. So the diaphragm is moving, but it is not actually stabilizing us. So babies have a diastasis, and they're also peeing their pants. In the postpartum time period, this is exactly what postpartum women are dealing with. And so if we can actually more mimic baby movements instead of sucking belly buttons to spines and pulling pelvic floors up to our eyeballs, we actually do end up functioning better. So that's not a short answer to your question, but it's such a big question. It's really important. So thank you.
No, and it's such a powerful answer that you touched on so much in there. So thank you. Thank you for breaking that all down for us. I am going to turn to Dr. DeVries now, and I want to shift us into hormones. Hormones impact everything from digestion to energy to mood. What are a few key signs that a hormonal imbalance might be at play, and when should moms start looking deeper?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about a couple different hormones. So, I think when we talk about hormones in the kind of the women's space, we're often talking about estrogen and progesterone. And perimenopause can start as early as the late 30s, and that's considered normal. And often, if a woman has a later birth, later in life birth, she's more likely to kind of move into perimenopause, sometimes even directly from the postpartum period. And in that phase, your estrogen becomes more erratic, progesterone starts to drop, and you might see changes in sleep, especially kind of classically, there's the 2 a.m. wake up. Anxiety or depression could get worse, brain fog, changes in your period, including worse PMS. So your periods might be irregular, they might be heavier, you might end up having some spotting in between. Those are all signs that hormones are not kind of cycling in the optimal way. And then in the postpartum state, this is also a relatively low estrogen state. So even if you're far away from perimenopause, sometimes some support with vaginal estrogen is helpful because your vaginal tissues are really susceptible to low estrogen. So that can happen even if you're not in perimenopause. And then we think about testosterone. We all have testosterone in addition to men. Testosterone gradually starts to decline starting in your 30s. And the biggest change we often see with that is a decrease in libido. But also women can attribute that to fatigue or kind of trouble putting on muscle even if you're working out, or brain fog. So some overlap with the estrogen, progesterone as well. And then talking about cortisol, kind of our stress hormone, really significant clinically elevated cholesterol is really more of a medical condition called Cushing syndrome. But many of us, in this talking about what's normal, walk around with a sort of state of general stress and that kind of that fight or flight, again, like Dr. Moon was mentioning. And even though the lab test may be normal, your levels are not optimal. And there's some overlap, again, also with these other hormones and the fatigue. You could start having irregular periods, and then insulin resistance can become a problem with trouble losing weight or putting on more weight than you anticipated. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but those are just some of the things to look for.
Those are such helpful pointers and areas to focus on that everyone needs to be aware of. So thank you so much for that. We are going to shift a bit now into the mental load, which is going to entail burnout, boundaries, emotional well-being. And we talk a lot about physical symptoms, but burnout and anxiety and mental exhaustion are just as real. And they often go hand in hand with what's happening in our bodies. So this is going to be just a general question, not directed as a start to any of our particular experts, but there is some experts out there that say that burnout isn't a personal failure. 100% agree. However, as a mom, it's hard to not point fingers at ourselves and say that I am the fault of the reason I feel this way. I'm just not able to handle it. But the experts believe that it's actually a systemic failure. What do you think that these experts might mean by this? And how can understanding this as being more of a systemic issue versus a personal issue help moms start to release some of the guilt that they may be harboring?
Cindy, I've thought about this a lot just in how our environment is set up, how our society works. We kind of live rather isolated compared to how, humanity has always been. And just not having like these micro interactions with people on a regular basis, that can be kind of isolating, and not having areas like the third space that is outside of your work or home, but another gathering place where women can come together and support each other and just communicate and realize that what they're going through is probably pretty common. We have to be really intentional about that and seek out those spaces. So there's many systemic issues, but just thinking about like your physical space, how we live, and trying to find workarounds and compensating for that, trying to put yourself in environments where you can connect more with other moms. It's really important.
The part of the systemic issue is the expectations that we allow ourselves to take on that don't belong to us, of what people think about whether or not you go back to work after having a baby, and when you go back to work, and whether or not you work part-time or full-time, or you don't work outside the home, and allowing the worry of what that looks like to other people affect how we feel about ourselves and what we think we should be taking on or not taking on. And truly, this ends up being an opportunity for boundaries for us as women and as mothers, to investigate where it is that we, need to create those connections, like Kate was saying, and have community support that we trust and feel held and supported in, rather than just like, okay, well, I'll go back to work because I don't have people outside of work, but work is no longer fulfilling me. And now I'm having to work just to be able to pay for my childcare. And that exchange doesn't feel good. And so the number of challenges that new parents face, and probably the hardest part about it is that despite before having a baby, knowing that after having a baby, everything was going to change, I had no idea what that was going to look like for me as an individual, and none of us do. So it's not until we're in the postpartum time period and we're kind of faced with a 6 to 12 week decision for what kind of the rest of our life looks like, because we need to decide usually, are we going back to work? What does that look like for our family, and how are we going to navigate that? And the decisions that we made in the prenatal time period might not apply any longer because everything just changed because you brought a baby into the world. And so the changing dynamics, I think it's really helpful to have conversations like this, because when we realize we're the only people who need to give us permission for what our postpartum life looks like, I think that's super, super, super important. And as women with other women, giving each woman grace for whatever choice she makes, I think is really helpful for kind of calming down the systemic problem of women facing burnout.
Absolutely. You both brought up some really great points there. One of the things that stuck out was almost this idea of comparison, and it's rampant, especially when society does not bring attention to the fact, or we all tend to forget or overlook the fact that every child, every human is different, and they're going to be raised different. They're going to have different behaviors. But if your child's not hitting a milestone, or if your child is acting out, quote unquote, in a certain way that's different, there's this feeling of failure, or I am not a good parent, or whatnot. So I'm going to turn to Nikki now and look at this from a physical health lens. How do you see stress and burnout showing up in your patients? I'm sure that there is a myriad of ways, since we are all different, but I'd love to hear how you most often see it showing up, and what happens when moms turn their head, giving a blind eye for too long. What ends up happening?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think it's very common, and I see this a lot in the office, for these symptoms to start to manifest, not just mentally and emotionally, but physically, right? And, as moms, I think it's just that innate, we prioritize our children and oftentimes a lot of other people over ourselves. So there becomes this period. I mean, we know there's the immediate postpartum where, yes, like the needs are really high and the demands for you are really high. But I mean, this will go on, right? for years and years and years. And, I think us in this space is empowering women from the get-go, and that starts prenatally, to prioritize themselves and prioritize their care, right? Because, you know the old saying, like, you cannot pour from an empty cup. But sorry, circling back to your question, Cindy, the most common things I see typically, arising, and like you say, every woman is different. So symptoms are going to be different. But this can be like the mood changes, right? The irritability, fluctuating moods, the fatigue, oftentimes sleep disturbances, general body aches and pains, headaches, heart palpitations. We can kind of lump this all together, and these can be symptoms that are presenting from stress and burnout. Could they be other things? Yes, of course. And, we want to investigate those as needed. But I think that your stress is going to affect every person differently. And when it's coupled with hormonal changes and fluctuations, that's a whole other level, right, of impact. But if we ignore, and women ignore these signs for too long, then we are going to see more chronic conditions, more detrimental health impacts. And the big things that I think of with this are thyroid health, cortisol health, and sex hormone health, right? Those are, I'd say, the three big ones that I see can have more detrimental impacts when this burnout and this kind of these symptoms have gone on for too long. Because, the great thing is the body does an excellent job at compensating. It's built to do that. And we love that about our bodies. But when there's long-term compensation, that's when you get into the problem area. So I'd say that's the biggest thing for women to focus on, is not ignoring and listening to themselves and listening to their body.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been so joyful just to spend time with all of you. You're wonderful smarts. You all have so much of it. And we're grateful that you're sharing this with our community. It's a very important topic to talk to moms about the holistic solutions for common mom ailments. And we really are grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. That's a wrap. You carved out a few moments just for yourself, and that's a big deal.
We understand that time is limited, but we've got your back, which is why we keep these episodes short, sweet, and packed with goodness.
Don't miss a thing. Hit the follow button so you're always the first to know when a new episode drops. If you had as much fun as we did, let us know by leaving a review.
And remember to let other moms know that we're here doing motherhood alongside you. Grateful to share a few moments taking care of you.